I've mentioned a few times in these lists that I actually watched the Star Trek movies out of order when I was much younger and had very little control over these things. Just saying, nobody's fault, Dad. I actually saw Star Trek 3, I believe, before I saw Star Trek 2 or even Star Trek the Motion Picture. So I tend to look at this film as my introduction to the Star Trek film universe. I certainly have very clear memories of several scenes in this film, earlier, I think, than some of the ones that followed. I do have funny stories, though, about The Final Frontier, which we will get to when we're covering that film in a couple of weeks. Thank you everyone so far, by the way, who's given such lovely feedback on the ups and downs. We're really enjoying doing these. It's been a long time coming. Had so much fun with the motion picture, so much fun with the Wrath of Khan. Thank you very much for people who complimented my jacket. I'm not going to lie, it has shrunk. That's what I'm going to say. I most certainly have not changed shape at all. It shrunk, so it was nice to wear it again for that video. So thank you very much. Before we go anywhere, please make sure that you are hitting the like and subscribe buttons. It makes such a difference when you do, honestly now. It's because of people who subscribe and like that we get to do these videos. Right, I've said me piece. Shall we have a look at Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock? Where did we leave our plucky heroes? Well, we had a new planet, but it cost us a Spock to get there. We had a crew that was a little bit shell-shocked. We had a chief engineer who'd lost a nephew, but we had an admiral who'd gained a son. So there was an awful lot going on, really, in the Wrath of Khan. As we go into the search for Spock, we start with a little bit of a recap. That entire final scene, really, of Spock in engineering, slowly dying, that little bit of the funeral as well. And I'm actually going to come in with a bit of a down. And that down is chopping Kirstie Alley out of this recap. There's a reason, of course, which I will discuss in a moment. Pretty obvious reason, to be fair. Oh, I've always just this little scene, because it is direct lifting footage from The Wrath of Khan. It's like, oh, would have been nice to see her again. The fact that the character returns in this one, please, have we not had more confusing moments in Star Trek than that? So yeah, that's a little down for me. We kick off right away, and of course accompanies us all the way through, is Taken Up, James Horner. James Horner returns to score Star Trek 3 The Search for Spock, having joined Star Trek with Star Trek 2 The Wrath of Khan. He reuses some of his themes, that is something that will be a part of his career, and also creates new lush themes. Particularly this opening prelude is just beautiful as it plays over the recap, but then goes into the opening credits as we pan through the Genesis planet. There are some musical moments in this score, for example, pretty much everything to do with Space Dock, which is up there with my favorite musical moments from the entire franchise. I am gonna tease him a little bit as the film goes on, you'll see when, but genuinely, what a beautiful score that this is for this film. The next up is going to go to that lovely beauty shot of the Enterprise. Now, I mean, the poor thing has had 7 levels of hell kicked out of it by the Reliant, but we still get that gorgeous, gorgeous approach. Funnily enough now, so there's now a 4K remaster for the 40th anniversary of Star Trek The Search for Spock, which was released last year, which, I mean, much like I was plugging the 4K director's remaster of the 4K remaster of the director's cut of the motion picture. Sorry, to get that one accurate. I'm probably going to do the same for The Search for Spock, but I've seen this film so many times, and honestly, I think it's always looked good. There are definitely moments where it shows its age, things that have been cleaned up in the remaster, but Leonard Nimoy, director, you put together a good team, I won't lie to you. I do, however, have a down. So as this beauty shot comes along, we see some of the damage that the Enterprise incurred in the battle with the Reliant. Then we go into Admiral Kirk's captain's log. Monologues on the brain. And he talks about some of the crew being reassigned, that they're on their way home. And just how long has it been? My down is that this film confuses time rather a lot. There's an awful lot of sort of throwaway comments which suggests things either have taken an awful lot longer to happen or have taken no time at all. For example, it's inferred that the Enterprise is flying home from the Mutara sector at this point, right? I think that's the general understanding we have, but that the crew's all been reassigned. But he specifically says the ship feels empty, which means presumably another ship rendezvoused with the Enterprise and left it to limp home. And I guess that doesn't stretch credulity, but it just introduces that first question of, how long has it been? It's obviously long enough that Genesis has become such a hot button topic, that another ship has been assigned to study it, that David Marcus has had a chance to get home and get back on the Grissom. Do you know what I mean? And then of course there's the big one that comes with Fleet Admiral Morrow's debrief of the crew. Before we get anywhere near Fleet Admiral Morrow though, I will give an up to Scotty and how he plays with time. Because he says the refit will take 8 weeks, but he doesn't have 8 weeks, so I'll do it for you in 2. I love it. Again, I'm noticing on this rewatch specifically how Shatner and James Doohan tended to bounce off each other very well. When we think of the original series, at least speaking for myself, I tend to think of the big 3 in terms of relationships. But it's there with all of them, particularly with Shatner and Doohan, and I really like them in this film together. The next scene takes us to the Merchantman. Now, I really like this little ship. It is, basically, it's gorgeous. It is a model that would get reused throughout Star Trek again. It is a model that, thanks to Eagle Moss, I now have one of in my house. It's simple. It's both ugly and not. It kind of looks like one of those horseshoe crabs, and I'm here for it. I also want to give an up to Valkyris, who is the first Klingon woman that we've seen since the original series episode, The Day of the Dove, which of course featured Kara. She holds herself with such poise and such grace, and yet also, she's not Lursa and B'Etor. Oh, I don't know what the best word is for it. Maybe I've used it already. Poison Grace. Poison Grace. Ooh, Freudian slip. Where does that come from? Okay, well, she obviously has a very good relationship with Christopher Lloyd's Krug. Now, I think the entire destruction of Genesis at the end of this film was because Christopher Lloyd was chewing the scenery so much, there was just nothing left. He is clearly having a ball in this film, and he's fun because he commits as hard as he does. I think it's part of the fun. Now, before we get anywhere near there, he does something that's pretty much not fun. Valkyris was great. Bye, Valkyris. She transmits this stolen Genesis data over to Krug, which then results in the introduction of the Klingon bird of prey. It's such a well-known ship now, it's been in so many iterations of Star Trek and appeared so many times, that it's sometimes funny to remember this is the film in which it appeared for the very first time. And it wasn't even a Klingon ship. Many people will know the story behind the Klingon bird of prey, and some people won't. So what I will say, stick around for temporal observations, because there is a cool story behind the design of this iconic Klingon ship. We see in this first introduction as well the fact that it can change wing positions, because as it decloaks, it's in flight mode, which is the wings out horizontal. It then swings around and drops the wings down into attack mode, which is, it goes from that to that. That's probably the image of the bird of prey you're probably well known. Now, while we, the audience, might enjoy seeing it, people on the Merchantman don't, because this is just after Kirk realizes Valkyris is party to the secret of Genesis, which he can't have. So he swings about and destroys the Merchantman. You're some prick, Krug, to be honest now. He is, but he's also an animal lover. After he does express some sadness over having to kill Valkyris, we get, Qapla', for example. He then destroys the ship, and as he goes, his demon dog. So there's been a discussion, is this a Targ or not? And if it is, this is a Targ who's seen better days. I will say jury's out. If it's a Targ, it's a Targ. If it's not a Targ, well, it doesn't look like any Targ I've ever seen. It looks like it's been skinned, frankly. It was also operated by somebody sitting under the floor. Like, this is puppet operation. I love the 80s and practical effects. I'm giving the demon dog an up. If you know me, you know that I like an L docking sequence. All right, up the entire docking sequence as the Enterprise arrives home. That up is all-encompassing. James Horner's music, the shots of the Enterprise, the introduction of Space Dock, which I love that big old mushroom in the sky. It was one of the Eagle Moss models that I probably would have pushed my mother down a flight of stairs to get. No, I wouldn't. Geraldine Ferrick will kill me if I say that. And also, it's just the construction of it is beautiful. And it's one of the things of this film that lends a sense of scale to Starfleet. V'ger certainly came with V'ger was big, okay? Like, motion picture did it well, but dry dock and the orbital office, as beautiful as they are, you kind of get that feeling of, are they not a bit small to be like Earth orbit? Space dock, I think, was the answer to that. I mean, this thing is flipping enormous. You could easily see this from the ground looking up at the stars. So as it flies through, those giant sexy doors open, the Enterprise goes in, we get more shots of the damage that it incurred in the Battle of the Mutara Nebula. We get that lovely, lovely shot of it flying by the officer's mess or the bar, taken up, cameo from Grace Lee Whitney, nice to see it again, Rand. It's just a fantastic sequence altogether. In this sequence, there's more temporal observations as well, but we also get taken up. Would you look at that? She's rumored to have transwarp drive. Aye, that if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a wagon. By which I say, I love the USS Excelsior. I love the Excelsior so much. It's so pretty. I love it. Did I tell you that I love the Excelsior? I really love the Excelsior. I love the curves on it. I love the shape of it. I love that it's clearly a next step in the evolution from the Constitution class. If the Miranda was a sidestep, and that's not shade, I love the Miranda class, the Excelsior is the next step up. And obviously the design would prove to be so enduring that we would see it well into DS9 and Voyager. I mean, this thing is in service for well over 100 years. It is gorgeous. And even the redesign, I know I'm on a tangent, but even the redesign in Star Trek Picard as well, still so evocative of this original Nilo Rodus design. Once the Enterprise is docked, we then get this security warning. Someone has forced the doors to Spock's quarters. And I actually have a down here. So Chekhov is manning Spock's station, but he's also, in this film, I think he's security chief as well. Honestly, you can play a game of what job does Chekhov have in this film? The display that he's looking at, that's showing that flashing beacon to say someone has forced Spock's doors, it's of the original series Enterprise design. Now, this may be sacrilege for me to say. Why are they showing the ship as it was something like 10 or 11 years previously? I had a good conversation actually with a friend recently where the motion picture, it's about 2271, because Kirk had his 5-year mission aboard the Enterprise, and then we had 18 months of redesign, and then the motion picture episodes. Whereas this film is confirmed, it took a while, but it's confirmed 2285. So effectively, you're looking at a schematic of a 20-year-old ship. I will come to it, don't worry. For me, that was a down. It just felt like they hadn't done a schematic of the Constitution 2, the refit Constitution. Chekhov reports that there is a life form in Spock's quarters, and he's quite perturbed because he sealed the doors himself. And as Admiral Kirk is a bit frustrated, he goes off saying this entire crew is on the verge of hysteria regarding Spock. So, away he goes. And Chekhov is not very happy. When Scotty comes over to look at the display, "Ja nie sumoshetchi, no vot." We get the very strange inclusion of a line in Russian. Now, it's not strange that Chekhov would speak Russian, it's just everyone else has been speaking English for quite a while. Did the universal translator suddenly stop working? Anyway, roughly translated, he says, "I'm not crazy, look." I just think it's a fun scene. Kirk arrives at the door of Spock's quarters, where he's greeted by those two security guards. Now, the general attire that they're wearing seems to be at least a hybrid of what we saw in Star Trek the Motion Picture. But what we do get is the introduction of the Star Trek 3 phaser. I really like this phaser. I'm not going to tell you what I spent to get one of these because it was too much. I am not to be trusted with money. But yeah, no, I really, really like this phaser. For me, I think this is closer in design to the original series phaser. I don't love the one from The Wrath of Khan, and I know it makes a return. It is quite sad that it only appears in The Search for Spock. It doesn't then appear, there's a tiny caveat for that. It appears in one episode of The Next Generation, but in terms of regular use, it doesn't appear again. So I just wanted to give it its moment. Star Trek 3 phaser. Up. We then get the scene of Kirk and McCoy in Spock's quarters. This is an up from me. DeForest Kelley is excellent in this film. He manages to play that role, and it's a difficult role. Like, how do you play someone who's possessed but also themselves? But, takes it as seriously as they do while still keeping the sort of light-hearted Star Trek fare of it all. I think DeForest Kelley nails this part. This whole scene, remember all of it. That is an up from me. We then get our scene of Fleet Admiral Morrow doing a sort of a quick debrief of the crew. I want to give an up to the fact that Scotty gets his promotion to Captain of Engineering on the Excelsior, even though it's not under the best of circumstances. Now I want to pick up on just an earlier down, and it's this idea of time. So this scene is sort of infamous in its own way because Morrow says the Enterprise is being decommissioned because it's 20 years old. This film being set in 2285, yes, that would track. The original series was 20 years in universe, and well, almost in real life as well. However, Kirk was not the first captain of the Enterprise, nor was he in the original series. Obviously, we met Pike in both The Cage, but although we shouldn't discount The Cage, let's say you want to discount The Cage, there's still the Menagerie. So Pike is very much there as a preceding captain. And then thanks to the animated series and, general writings about it, we know that Robert April was the captain under whom the Enterprise was launched. In fact, the Enterprise is nearly 40 years old in Star Trek: The Search for Spock. To me, this has always puzzled me. Is this a simple continuity error? Is it a research error? Was it a slip of the tongue? Morrow, he knew what he was saying. I don't really know. The problem is that it stands out. And although, of course, in the 1980s, they weren't planning on Strange New Worlds being a series, with Strange New Worlds, it's only aged a little bit worse. This scene does give us some good exposition though. We rapidly find out Genesis off limits, bit of a hot button topic, there's not going to be a refit. You kind of get the cliff notes. And then you get, I'm giving it up to the Grissom. I will not stand for the hate the Oberth class gets. I won't stand for it. I've loved that ship since I first saw this film. Does it make sense? Kinda. It's effectively a flying sled with a cargo container underneath it. Right, so yeah, okay, well, it's not aerodynamic, but space. I don't know. And nor was it ever meant to be a warship, as was demonstrated in this film. But also, I've always thought it was really odd. They sent a fleet of starships against Wolf 359, including the Bonus Doll, which was an Oberth-class ship. So I'm sorry, did that crew piss you off and you just wanted to kill them all? Anyway, I like the Grissom. This leads to the introduction of Robin Curtis as Saavik. Not to belabor a point, having watched the films out of order, Robin Curtis was my first Saavik. So she was the template, if you like, for how I understood the character. And she, in this film, I think does so much with a much more restrained performance. Because this Saavik, she's nowhere near as outwardly emotional as Kirstie Alley's Saavik was. And there's a couple of behind-the-scenes reasons for this, temporal observations, but I think she does so much within that restriction. I think it's a performance that has absolutely stood the test of time. Nice as well to see Merritt Buttrick back as David. I'm sure he has a happy ending. I'm giving it down for Captain J.T. Esteban, who, how on earth did he become a captain? For the hate that John Harriman gets as captain of the Enterprise B, I don't understand why J.T. Esteban doesn't get equal or more hate. Yeah, I'm going to use the word hate. Because he's useless. He's a walking textbook. Honestly. At least he doesn't have to worry about it for very long. Back on Earth, this film made the excellent decision of bringing Mark Lenard back. Another motion picture did it, but as Sarek taken up. This is Sarek's first appearance since the animated series episode Yesteryear. Mark Lenard was one of the very few original series guest stars who came back in the animated series. Roger C. Carmel would come back as Harry Mudd as well. He brings a gravitas to this scene. I don't know, I just think it's pitch perfect. I also want to give an absolute up to William Shatner in the scene with the mind meld as well. They play off each other very, very well. That the idea of a mind meld can come across quite silly. And there has been times it's been played for comedy. There's been other times, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, that we will get to on the retro ups and downs, where it has absolutely not been played for comedy. This one, I think, is pitch perfect. The way it's shot, the way it's lit, the way they act it, such an outstanding scene. They establish the fact that Spock might not be quite as dead as we might have thought so. And almost to prove a point, back on the Genesis planet, David and Saavik have beamed down, best thing they ever did in terms of staying alive for a while. They find Spock's casket surrounded by, they were microbes, now they're slugs. And then David does something really odd. He just opens Spock's casket. Down. What were you expecting to find, David? You know, your scan showed life. You found your life. It's sitting there all over the ground. We know, hi, we're going to see Spock again, but I've always thought that was such an odd decision. I respect that it does set up an awful lot of what's coming, because then, of course, we hear that cry over the horizon. But yeah, leave his casket alone, you weirdo. Everything's more or less in motion now. We can infer Spock's alive, Saavik and David are looking for him, Grissom's floating overhead. We know that there's a Klingon ship that is now well aware of the Genesis planet. They're on their way. We also know that Kirk is now aware that Spock's body must be brought to Vulcan because possibly it can be recombined with his Katra, which is within McCoy. All right, all of the pieces are on the board. I have to give an up to Morrow, right? Because from his point of view, Kirk makes the statement, you don't have to believe. But he's not about to just turn over a starship to go and break all sorts of galactic treaties, to go on, from his point of view, a wild goose chase to Genesis. Morrow did nothing wrong. Not that I disagree with Kirk going to Genesis, but yeah, I just want to give like an up there, because I think he as well kind of gets this bit of a reputation as a bit of a pencil pusher, a bit of a, oh sure, we couldn't possibly do that, it's a Tuesday. No, there's none of that. I like their interaction in this scene, and they play off each other very well. Having said that, I still really like, Kirk going, the word is no, I am therefore going anyway. That's an up. McCoy at the alien bar, the whole scene. It's an up. Now, I will say, McCoy's good old-fashioned racism pops up its head again, as it tended to do. Look, McCoy is a complicated character. As beloved as he is, he was a product of his time, shall we say. Slagging off the aliens' ears. Don't do that. It's a part of his physiology. Do you know what I mean? But I like how he plays that, to expect one to order poison would not be logical. And that whole trying to Vulcan nerve pinch the security officer. The exchange with the unnamed alien, I really like it all. It's a fun scene. Fashion has aged well. I'm not going to lie, I want to see at least one person dressed as that waitress at the next convention I go to, because where did you get that amount of Christmas lights? Back on the Genesis planet, you got Saavik and David Marcus, who are walking through these different landscapes before they find the Vulcan child. I have to give it down. This is one of those scenes where Search for Spock is kind of showing its age. These are all clearly sound stages. They're beautiful matte paintings, but they're very obviously matte paintings. And it is something that Star Trek would run into trouble with as time went on. They signal up to the Grissom that they've found a Vulcan, and no, they're not beaming up. Again, excellent decision to stay alive for a while. We then get what is easily one of my favorite sequences in the film. McCoy has been arrested, and Admiral Kirk goes to see him before he's transferred and does the, how many fingers am I holding up? That's not very damn funny. Up. Sulu just tries to shoot the breeze with that security officer, who yawns, and he says, keeping you busy? This the guy, for no reason at all, stands up, towers over him and says, don't get smart with me, Tiny. I'm delighted to see that. Sulu puts him in his place, slams his face against a wall and tosses him on the ground. Don't call me Tiny. Up. On the Excelsior, Scotty's packing it in for the night. Captain Styles says he looks forward to breaking some of the Enterprise's speed records tomorrow. And as Scotty gets into the elevator, asks for floor, please. Thank you. Up your shaft. Up. Yes, stick around for temple observations for that one. One character who is sadly shortchanged in the search for Spock is Uhura. She gets great stuff, just not very much of it. So when we get to her transporter room, I love the exchange with her and Mr. Adventure. He turns around to Uhura, first of all accuses her of in the twilight of her career. Good luck with that, mate. And then says, what, have you lost all sense of reality? And then Nichelle Nichols, but this isn't reality. This is fantasy. Yeah, how's that feel? The old heart pumping there? Get in the closet. Sorry, I wanted to show the phaser again. But I do. I love this scene. Uhura manages to beam them over to the Enterprise, and she plays a critical role in the novelization. Up for Uhura in this scene, Nichelle Nichols. We don't get very much of her, but what we do is brilliant. And last time I'll say this, stick around for the temporal observations. There's a lot to get through. Vonda McIntyre did a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the story of the search for Spock. We're then standing on the bridge of the Enterprise, and I think one of the greatest crimes in Star Trek history occurs here. What on earth is Chekhov wearing in this scene? Down. What in the puritanical collared nonsense? Ugh. Right, anyway. They start to boot up the Enterprise. We get that great sequence then of Captain Styles over on the Excelsior, played by the late, great James B. Sicking, who is sitting there, he's doing his nails. How can you have a yellow alertance? For as much of a smarmy git as he is, take it up, Captain Styles. Beginning the reversing of the Enterprise out of space. I mean, come on. The whole scene is an up. I just love it. You know, we're reversing the Enterprise. The Excelsior is powering up with orders to pursue. Space doors are closed. The whole thing is just brilliant. You have more great Kirk and Scotty. It's like, and now, sir, the doors, Scotty, the doors. Aye, sir, I'm working on it. Latinum up for this film is the entire stealing the Enterprise sequence. And then reversing through those doors by a hair's breadth, we get that gorgeous overhead shot of the Enterprise backing out with James Horner's returning Wrath of Khan theme playing over that. Then we have the Excelsior coming out too. It's just so good. And then Styles is, Kirk, you do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again. Warp speed. Enterprise warps off, the Excelsior gets ready to pursue and breaks down. Good morning, Captain. I do want to give a little up as well to that cameo from Miguel Ferrer. Many people will know him from many different things. I personally know him from the TV series adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand. He was brilliant as Lloyd Henreid and has his little cameo here. I'm sure there's people screaming at the screen going, but RoboCop. I hear you. But away they go, and Scotty dropping those little bits of the Excelsior's core into McCoy's hand. There you are, Doctor, from one surgeon to another. The more they complicate the plumbing, the more easier it is to stop up the drain. Nailed it. Back to where we will spend a large chunk of the rest of the film now, which is over the Genesis planet. And the Grissom finally realizes that they're not alone. They're being jammed, and a Klingon bird of prey decloaks. Up to the greatest extra, or supporting cast, or I would argue star of the film, Gene Morey. If you look at that extended reaction shot, genuinely, she's always stood out for me in this film. Just as the Klingon ship is about to, destroy the Grissom. Like, unbelievable. I've always loved that eye roll. And then, bye-bye Grissom. Some people are very happy to see it blow up. I wasn't. Maybe Esteban, but not the rest of the crew. It's not their fault. We then get a scene which is so strange, and it's down from me. And it's Krug and his two cronies beaming down to the planet. And that scene where, he allows the microbe to wrap itself around him. And I know it's sort of, because he kind of seems sad almost to kill this thing. It's like it's adding on from that. He's an animal lover and he's sad to do this, but it's such a strangely paced scene. So yeah, that was always down to me. And up for me, however, is Saavik cutting straight to the core of David. This is where we get the revelation that David Marcus used protomatter in the Genesis Matrix, which is why the planet is aging in chunks. And, Spock along with it. Oops, we're not supposed to say his name yet. Anyway, Spock along with it. It's because he cheated, as Saavik says. And as she also says, is how many will pay the price for your impatience? How many have died? And what is yet to come? It's such a powerful scene. And again, Robin Curtis nails this moment. David, full of guilt, they see that there's 3 lights off on the very real landscape, and he goes off to confront them. That'll go well. While he's gone... Oh, I'm not allowed to say that. Pon farr, baby. Poor Spock, of course, is aging in chunks and reaches Pon farr. Saavik is able to help him through it. In Hollywood, in cinema, there is this propensity for just throwing in a random sex scene. There you go, that'll go in the trailer. Brilliant. This is so not that. They come up with this idea of, well, they didn't, sorry, Mark Leonard came up with the idea of touching fingers back in Journey to Babel, but they expand on it and they're able to do this. Sorry, I don't know if this needs to be censored, by the way, but they're able to do this Pon farr scene. And of course, there is way down the line, there is fallout from this, but it's actually so beautifully filmed between the two of them. It's, I think, carefully done as well. There is a very strange moment just before it, and it's a continuity error that's always bugged me, to the point that it's a down. As the Earth shakes and Saavik wakes up, just before all this, there's clearly a Klingon officer, or at least his uniform, in that tree. Has anyone else noticed this? Well, after Pon farr is assuaged, Saavik and Spock are thrust to their knees beside a beaten David. And it's very clear that he was quite ineffectual against the Klingons. I suppose, in fairness to David, he's a scientist, they're 3 trained warriors. I'll give him a pass on that one. Up above, the Enterprise has entered the Mutara system, I guess? Mutara system? Mutara sector? Genesis system? Enterprise is here. They're looking for the Grissom. Of course, the Klingon bird of prey knows the Grissom isn't there. What they see is a Federation battle cruiser, not often it's called that, approaching. Krug is beamed up to his ship, and there follows such an underwhelming battle. Down. As Scotty seems to be speaking for the script here when he says, "I did not expect to take it into battle." Yeah, clearly. Listen, I'm being a bit harsh because what it sets up. But we get, it fires a torpedo at the Klingon ship as it decloaks. The Klingon ship then fires and hits the main energizer. And you've got 2 ships which are pretty much floating in space. That's it. That's the ship action in this film. Star Trek: The Search for Spock, for as much as I love it, will never go down as one of the most exciting space battle films ever made. Where I think it succeeds is in the characters. And we get, it's quite a rapid succession of scenes which are so powerful. The casual brutality, which is an up of Krug saying, "I will kill one of the prisoners just to show my intent." The f***ing hell? Casual brutality that Krug displays to show his intent that he will just have one of the prisoners killed. And although there is that exchange of Kirk going, "How dare you take prisoners?" I believe it. I do believe Krug in this scene. And it does give one of, I think, how it's shot, with no music as well, works. David goes out a hero. David had to be the one to die. One is you couldn't kill Saavik, and also you were hardly going to kill Spock. So it had to be David, but it's this loss that Kirk has to go through to endure to save Spock, but also David is atoning for his use of the protomatter. He is, however inadvertently, responsible for an awful lot of what's happening. I think he goes out a hero. He saves Saavik. It is something that we will revisit, however, briefly in 2 of the upcoming ups and downs. The scene that follows, Shatner as Kirk, "You Klingon bastards, you've killed my son." I'm not going to beat around the bush, folks. My dilithium up with the film. Shatner nails it. Absolutely nails it. You believe him in this. He stumbles backwards. This is Admiral Kirk. The be-all, the end-all. He is affected. He is hurt. You can believe here why he feels the way that he does about Klingons from this point forward. Now, whether you agree or not is a different story. And that McCoy goes over to him. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Kirk's solution to what happens next is, of course, iconic. "Goodbye, old girl, we hardly knew you." Actually, we knew you quite well. Well, we might have known you for 20 years or 40 years. The self-destruct sequence of the USS Enterprise is iconic. The story goes that they tried so hard to keep this a secret going into the film, and the marketing team said, no, we're putting that in the trailer. Producer Harv Bennett fought them and lost. So this film was bloody advertised as the final journey of the USS Enterprise, with footage of this scene included in the trailer. You absolute morons. Why would you do that? Sorry, up to the entire sequence, not up to the people who cut that trailer. I hope you still feel guilty. It's heart-wrenching. It's, the way the music swells, the way they run through to the transporter room, the fact that at this point there still takes 3 people to start a destruct sequence. Okay, Star Trek Picard, that's something you obviously did away with. It just pitch perfect. Pitch perfect, pitch perfect, pitch perfect. And that scene where the Klingons walk onto the bridge, it seems to be run by computer. It is the only thing speaking. 4, 3, get out of there! Followed by the crew down on the Genesis planet, watching the flaming wreckage of the Enterprise crashing down into this planet of new life. My God, Bones, what have I done? What you had to do, what you always do. Turn death into a fighting chance to live. Up. They arrive, they save. They save Saavik and Spock. Spock at this point is now back to, physically normal. Kirk shoots that one Klingon, goes flying. Always kind of like that scene. Krug beams down after Kirk signals to the bird of prey to say that, sorry your crew's gone, but we're down here. He orders for almost everyone to be beamed up as prisoners, leaving Spock on the planet because, as Krug says, because you wish it. I've actually quite liked that exchange. What I do not like, in any way, down. This is a fight sequence worthy of the Gorn. It's a bit rough, isn't it? And I mean, there's reasons behind it. There was supposed to be, rocks pushing up out of the ground. They did manage to get one of those out of several that were meant to be there. I do like the dissolution or dissolving, dissolution. I like how the planet is breaking up around them, but I mean, anyway, it's not aged very well. And also, I mean, frankly, Kirk shouldn't have stood a chance against Krug. Klingons are naturally stronger. We get the, I have had enough of you, and then falls down into the lava. It's all a little bit silly, considering it's the climactic fight. Kirk manages to pick up Spock, and he signals up to Maltz, or taken up, John Larroquette, nice to see you, beam up onto the bird of prey, and there we go. We're off the planet, which is exploding around them. That looks mostly good. The bit where the planet blows its rocks out into space, I think you can kind of see the Force perspective just a little bit much, but that scene where the sun is over the horizon of just lava, it's very biblical. It's very Book of Revelations, and I'm very much here for that. I think that was beautifully shot. Also a scene that's gorgeous is the Klingon bird of prey landing on Vulcan, leading into that entire sequence, taken up Dame Judith Anderson, taking this as serious as an absolute seizure. The entire scene, it's beautiful, it's, ceremonial, it swells with emotion. And when I found out that Nimoy had to fight to keep this scene in the film, it makes it all the better for me. Everything about it works, even Sarek commiserating with Kirk about the loss of the Enterprise and David. Everything works. Story goes, there's some deleted scenes which extended this. George Takei spoke about how there was a footage shot of them ascending to Mount Seleia. I do understand, honestly, why they cut that, because the scene itself, I think the pacing works. I think to add more to it would slow it down just a little bit too much. Plus, they'd have to carry a body up a lot of stairs. I've always wondered about that one. That was not an anti-grav platform. The sequence, gorgeous. Love the ceremony. And, I mean, Jim. Your name is Jim. Up. Spock is back. He's part of the crew. Everyone's happy to see him. I think we even get a smile from Saavik there as well, which I think well earned. And it ends, for as dark as this film was in parts, it ends on such an uplifting note, especially when it effectively says in that, the text at the end, haha, stick around for the sequel, which we will of course cover next week. But before we get there, will you take a jaunt with me to temporal observations. Robin Curtis is introduced in this film. Now, she would of course return as Saavik in The Voyage Home. She would then return not as Saavik, but in the Next Generation episodes, Gambit Parts 1 and 2. There is a story, I'll cover it more when we get to the Undiscovered Country, but there is a story about, was this going to be Saavik? Yes, it was going to be Saavik. Who was going to come back? Robin Curtis herself said she was never approached to reprise the role of Saavik in The Undiscovered Country. However, she does appear in the Otoy Unification short film that was released last year. This is incredibly important because what it does is confirm what was written into the script of The Voyage Home, which is that she was pregnant with Spock's child. After this Pon farr, she gives birth to his child, who is then in the Unification short film. So it's a pretty important, Robin Curtis is a very important Saavik. That's all I'm saying. Nilo Rodis designed just so much for this film. We have the Excelsior, we've got Space Dock, we've got the Grissom. As the Enterprise is actually pulling into Space Dock, if you look to the left-hand side of the screen, what you will see is one of the original mock-up models of the Enterprise that was planned for Planet of the Titans, which eventually became the motion picture. So actually there's two Enterprises in this scene as opposed to just one. Space Dock itself was just a beautiful marvel of a model. The whole thing, the big filming model exterior, was constructed with plexiglass and it was filled with blue neon lights. Rather than create a whole ton of windows, what they did is they painted directly onto the plexiglass and scratched off the windows so that the light would shine through, which I think is just really, really clever. And then interior, that was like a 20-foot sized model. I mean, that was a big, big model. So I'm glad that we do get to see more of Space Dock as the films go along. Introduced here is the Bird of Prey. Right, I've teased you with this story. So if you know this story already, feel free to let your attention wander. The Romulans were originally the antagonists of this film. In fact, according to an article on IO9 written by Robert Meyer Burnett, one of the early Harve Bennett ideas for the story — Harve Bennett was the producer who joined with Wrath of Khan and stayed through to Final Frontier — was that the Romulans would have discovered the Genesis planet, which was rich in dilithium. They would have set up a mining colony on the planet, and they, not the Klingons, they had the Bird of Prey. Now, if you think about it, it makes sense. The Romulan Bird of Prey was introduced in the original series Balance of Terror, where it was always the Klingon battle cruiser. Think of the motion picture. It's the Katinga battle cruiser that the Klingons then used. This, with the bird pattern underneath it as well, it was Romulan in design originally. I love that when they were designing it, basically Nemo goes, "Can you do something like this?" Sort of based on a linebacker, I believe. Yes, I know the foot of balls. In fact, as the story went along, basically they went, yeah, but the Klingons have already been in the films, so let's just go with the Klingons. Which I think is such a shame. But this will forever be a Klingon Bird of Prey. There's also a version of the story where the Klingons stole this ship, and it was always a Romulan Bird of Prey, but that never made it to screen. Another version, just really quick, another version of that story said that when the Vulcans discovered that the Federation had created this Genesis torpedo, this thing with ultimate power, was that the Vulcans decided to secede, or we're talking about seceding from the Federation, an idea that seems to have been picked up for Star Trek Discovery's third season when they seceded after the burn. The notion of a Vulcan Katra is introduced in this film. That would be used many more times, most recently, in fact, in Lower Decks' final season, when T'Pol manages to take in the Trill equivalent of the Katra from the dying Curzon Dax. Sarek returns, as I mentioned. He is one of the few guest stars who appeared in the original series, the animated series, and now in the movies as the same character as well, Mark Leonard. Phil Morris makes a little cameo here as the officer who asks Admiral Kirk if there's going to be a reception when they get home. He had previously appeared in the episode Miri and would go on to appear in the Voyager episode One Small Step. I want to talk about the odd-numbered films curse for a second. Now, For years and years and years, there was that, sort of common joke that the odd number films were pants and the even number films were good. So if you look at it, you got Motion Picture, Search for Spock, Final Frontier, odd number films, Wrath of Khan, Voyage Home, Undiscovered Country, even numbered films. I will be the first one to say the even numbered ones are probably more enjoyable, not gonna lie. But also, I think that's been exaggerated as the years have gone on. And I think there's enough proofs that has sort of been done away with. I'm not just saying that because I really love this film, I really do. The Epsilon 9 station from the motion picture makes a cameo. It's sitting on the wall in the officer's mess behind Morrow and Kirk. As I mentioned, that Planet of the Titans model is in space dock as the Enterprise pulls in. Now, Vonda McIntyre, the novelization for this film, does a lot of heavy lifting, particularly for Uhura's story. So, as you watch in the film, where did Uhura go? She's sitting in the transporter room, they beam off, the menfolk beam off onto the Enterprise, they fly off to Genesis, they have their adventure, and then Uhura just meets them on Vulcan. Well, the novelization fleshes this out. She, in fact, has an incredibly important job. She is effectively jamming any signal where their theft of the Enterprise is being reported to Starfleet. Because if you think about it, they do tend to get away pretty easily. She also manages to block any signal from the Excelsior back to space dock as well, reporting that they've broken down. This is a double-edged thing. It's both that she wants the Enterprise to escape, but also Styles, who is the captain of the Excelsior, became captain of the Excelsior over Sulu. Now, as I mentioned in the retro ups and downs for the Wrath of Khan, it was scripted that Sulu would become captain of the Excelsior in less than a month. Again, there's that issue of time, because here in the novelization, Sulu is informed that because he was away off on the Enterprise, he lost his window to command the Excelsior. Thus, Styles is sort of described as stealing the ship from him. Uhura gets her revenge for Sulu by effectively stranding Styles in space for a while. And considering this is the only time we ever see him, I don't think it was very good for his career. After this, she flees to the Vulcan embassy where she asks Sarek for asylum while being pursued by guards. Sarek grants her asylum. That then leads to Sarek and Uhura being on Vulcan at the end. Tribbles turn up in this film in the bar. Best of luck for any bar treats, because they're going straight into the Tribbles' mouths. We get that Arcanus Lager sign, which is on the wall. That would turn up again in Guinan's 10 Forward in Star Trek Picard. I've discussed the issue of time in this film. The Klingon Daktag? I always get that wrong. Anyway, the Klingon knife with its little poppy out blades makes its first appearance in this film. Christopher Lloyd, who is just so much fun in this film, was not the first choice of casting for Krug. In fact, Leonard Nimoy wanted to cast Edward James Olmos. Now, he would have recently appeared in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. The studio turned him down. Thankfully, Edward James Olmos, although he wouldn't appear in Star Trek in the future, he would work with an awful lot of Star Trek alum as Commander William Adama in the reimagined Battlestar Galactica series. Now, that would be an interesting Klingon to see. I have already given out to the people who cut the trailer, and I'm going to do it again. Don't put the destruction of your ship in the flipping trailer of the film. The studio executives didn't understand why Vulcan would be so important for the fans. So when the script came in, it was on Mount Seleia and Vulcan, they were like, nah, just do it on the Klingon ship at the end. Have McCoy do a little thingy, bring Spock back, put his mind in, happy out. Thankfully, Leonard Nimoy, I'm paraphrasing here, said, yeah, shut up. And fought and fought and fought for it. And in fact, he said that after this conversation with the script, the next time they were consulted was after he showed them the first cut of the film. Obviously, so happy that Nimoy fought for this ending, because not only, of course, does it set up the voyage home, but also, if you're going to have this big, massive Vulcan ceremony, do it on Vulcan. Now, thankfully, it would be the last time that executives would make any decision that would affect Star Trek in any way. Finally, then President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, apparently screened the search for Spock, and in his diaries recorded, it wasn't that good. Thankfully, he wasn't a particularly good president, so I think that balances out, don't you? I thought he was a prick. And there you have it, Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Look, I love this film. It's silly, it is a little bit over the top, but isn't that a lot of the original series anyway? I'm down with it. Obviously, we will be back for The Voyage Home, or the one with the whales. And I know, I mean, if you're like me, you're looking forward to this one as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching along. You're awesome, you're brilliant, you're cool. You all have lovely faces, and don't let anyone tell you differently. I know things are a bit bonkers out there. Will you please look after yourself and look after the people around you? You know, the more kindness we put out into the world, the better the world becomes. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please live long and prosper till I see you again. Make sure that you are liking, sharing, and subscribing. I know I keep going on about this, but it makes such a difference. Thank you very much. And until I see you again, stay safe.